Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the A-Space, and today we're going to be talking about a blast from the past, a guy known as Exolen. Now, if you are a loyal viewer to the channel, Exolen might already be someone you know about. However, there are probably a lot of people that don't know about this guy, so the point of this video is essentially to kind of go to the beginning and the build up into kind of like where it is right now, considering not a lot of people know about that part of the drama. Without further ado, let's start introducing you to the guy, shall we? So my first proper run into the guy would have had to do something with a birdie video that he made quite a while ago, where essentially he's talking about the Juno/Draggy situation with Birdie. I happen to have a plethora of issues with this video regarding it, so naturally I reached out to him to have him come onto a live stream to basically discuss it. For a little bit of context for the Draggy situation, it's essentially like when Birdie was 16 talking to this 13-year-old, and they would have somewhat interesting conversations to say the least. They kind of had like romantic/sexual conversations, and yeah, it was a little gross, it was a little disgusting. However, I kind of had an issue with Exolen how he labeled it. But interestingly enough, before I could even like press any stances onto Exolen when I had him on this live stream, he kind of already folds. It's specifically the one where you're calling Birdie a groomer.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, so just to check before we get into this, do you still stand by that take?
You know, I was actually looking at the video yesterday, and I was just thinking about like everything. You know, I don't know if I do. I don't know if I even want to keep the video up personally, but because so many people have issues with this, and yeah, I feel like I just like spat on the name of what actual grooming is, to be honest.
Now, there's going to be many moments of this live stream that kind of feel very foreshadowing on the type of person Exolen is, and there's very interesting key moments I'm going to highlight that kind of shows you the type of person he is. Like, for example, he sees no issue with spreading misinformation about someone as long as people don't like them.
I feel like, to be honest, I should take it down, but then at the same time, one of the victims like told me it should stay up because they want Birdie to just go down, and anything up that's spreading the word of anything should just stay up.
Now, I want you guys to keep that detail in the back of your brains, kind of just locked there and all secure, because it's definitely going to be important again later. But moving on for the next point, naturally, when someone's calling someone a groomer, I'm obviously going to be curious what their definition of grooming is if I disagree with their label. And I kid you not, their answer was pretty much it came to me in a dream. So, because why I'm a little confused, right? Because you do credit Shister, I believe, right? But like, from what I saw in Shister's video, not even they called Birdie a groomer. So I'm just kind of like, that's why I'm asking, like, how did you come to this conclusion?
I thought it at the time. I thought it was just like a good. I thought it was just like I didn't like respect the grooming like word well. I was just a dude I think at the time it was like not, like 1,000. I was not that big, but it's just this video blew out of the water. I should take things more seriously. I should take my platform more seriously. I don't think I should just throw around the grooming thing. I don't know where it came from, to be honest. It was just I just didn't use the word correctly. I just used it as like a big like, oh, and that's like my bad.
So far, the nature of Exolen so far is that he instantly concedes and folds on something under pressure. He also doesn't mind spreading misinformation on people as long as he doesn't like them, and he clearly doesn't know what words mean if he's just willing to pull them out of thin air to call people them. So on the surface, you may come to the conclusion that Exolen is just a bumbling idiot who's just reckless. But once I show you this final clip, it will start to show a bit more of a malicious side to Exolen himself.
I think I heard, again, I could be misremembering what you were said earlier in the stream.
Mm-hmm.
Relation of like your relationship with like something related to Birdie and like a patron or something like that.
The GoFundMe thing.
GoFundMe. So were you upset with that?
It did quite upset me, but I shouldn't have let emotion over.
Okay, so now it's kind of I'm gonna be kind of build off that. To me, it kind of with that being a night, kind of sounds like you were just kind of being petty. That's what it kind of comes off as.
Yeah.
Is like okay. You're being petty, so you did no research into something and you called somebody groomer. You know, you're like,
yeah, I know how I know how it sounds, but huh.
Now, what's very interesting to highlight there is Exolen just admitted to basically having an emotionally driven response due to feeling scammed by Birdie due to the $5 to GoFundMe that he lost out on. So to really break it down, he was starting to call Birdie a groomer over the draggy stuff because he got scammed out of $5, which shows a very high level of pettiness and emotionally driven response from this guy. So this went from reckless idiot to a malicious bad faith actor. So now that we got Exolen's archetype essentially out of the way, there is another person that I have to introduce for any of this drama to make sense. Introducing SlimedAlien. Now, SlimedAlien is a person with a very interesting digital footprint, to say the least. However, when they kind of first started out more into this community, at least when they were getting more attention, which would be more a proper way to say it, they were kind of a person who was just covering Birdie in a timeline sense for their drama. I did have a run-in with this person, however, it was kind of like a month prior to the actual drama, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. However, things would really start to unfold and kind of blow up in SlimedAlien's face when Shister would make this video on them. This video would essentially crack open SlimedAlien's past with Shister, whereas their previous bad experiences as from many years ago. In an attempt to make a long story short, Shister would accuse SlimedAlien of having abusive tendencies and to be an abuser. Now, this situation would take place 3 years ago, where SlimedAlien would be 15, as they are 18 now, where they would accuse them and show evidence of where they would threaten to cut themselves after every time they argued, wedge themselves into kind of like their relationship and trying to distance them, like, you know, Shister from their partner, and also gaslight and manipulate and lie about many things. Personally, looking at this from an objective standpoint, this is just another reason why I feel like minors should not be getting involved into commentary spaces, or even art commentary for that matter. Now that we got the complex context out of the way, we're going to be looking into how SlimedAlien would respond to this, and I'm going to promise you, it definitely wasn't the best way they could have gone about this.
It's so stressful when I finally gotten a point in my life where I'm happy. And I don't want the person I'm talking to leave me. And I know most of it is my fault.
Yeah, they would respond to Shister's video by making 3 little videos of their own, which just only had a black screen, but pretty much venting and ranting about Shister's video on them. And the problem is, whenever they would try to defend themselves, or basically make claims about Shister, you can guarantee that they had no evidence to back it up, and it was just purely word of mouth.
The amount of, like, cropped or, like, out of context screenshots, because he's done this to my friends several times, sending them, like, a bunch of out of context shit that makes him look like a victim in this situation, when he's not. Like, there are several instances of him antagonizing me, and me finally snapping at him, and then him playing the victim about it.
Now, besides a bunch of baseless claims that they make, there is something that I do want to talk about, which is another thing that they talk about themselves, which is essentially feeling like Shister compared them to a rapist.
Another thing is the fact that he makes me out to be a fucking rapist is insane. Like, the fucking me wanting to date him shit was built off a lot of miscommunications and lack of understanding. That's obviously no excuse. That's why I fucking got better. That's why I don't do that shit anymore.
Now, to be clear, it was never stated that SlimedAlien was a rapist. However, I do feel like the miscommunication comes from someone comparing SlimedAlien to a previous abuser, or their tactics to an abuser from their past who happened to be a rapist. Was there a better way to convey this point? There probably was, and I could agree to that, and that's fair. However, the point was more to compare the tactics and the behaviors to someone else, not the actual label like that. Now, many of you may have the fair and understandable question of, what does this even have to do with the Exolen situation? Well, this context was very well needed because a person who would come in to rush into SlimedAlien's defense was Exolen himself. Now, after some back and forth on the community tabs that Shister and Exolen would partake in, they actually ended up taking it to DMs, which I was actually given permission to show for this video. Now, the conversation would start off with some basic greetings, and Shister just asking directly if there was any direct criticisms or any issues they had with their video on SlimedAlien. Now, what's interesting is Exolen will go on to say that Shister made a great video, however, then be suspicious that Shister is quote-unquote trying to silence SlimedAlien, which this was never really the case. No one silenced them, and if you want to hear both sides out, go for it. That's perfectly fine in any situation. However, both sides were kind of already out at this point. I guess there was another video that SlimedAlien made after this, but it also had no other proof or anything to show for this, but it's kind of interesting to come to that conclusion. This next screenshot, they apologize for comparing this to the Quite situation of all things, and it seems that they did actually have a criticism earlier. I don't know why they thought the video was perfectly fine, or even like stated something along those lines. However, they go into more detail about how basically the rape comparison to SlimedAlien seems like it should have been taken with a lot more seriousness. In this next screenshot, Shister would then go on to explain and address the no means no in the thumbnail, not meaning that SlimedAlien is a rapist or anything like that, but more or less just the fact that they wouldn't respect boundaries. And as I said earlier, with the point being that they, I guess, compared a person who happened to be a rapist was purely for the manipulation tactics. It had nothing to do with them being a rapist. It was just because they mimicked the same behavior as them. After Exolen concedes to also being emotionally driven again, then Shister would go on to say that they haven't seen anybody make the claim, nor that they really would be encouraging it anyways, but they haven't seen anybody making the claim. And they also admit to having sometimes having an impulsive reaction to things. Exolen would then go on to express that they don't like the comparison to Birdie with SlimedAlien because SlimedAlien does not nearly have as much of a list of controversies to Birdie, and Shister kind of acknowledges this and understands their point. Then they have a conversation. Exolen was also considering making a video kind of like defending SlimedAlien at this point. Now in this next screenshot, Exolen and Shister seems like that they would be kind of relating to how stressful the situation is, just kind of like awaiting for more things to go through and just basically see how it ends. Now in this final screenshot, Exolen would kind of admit that the reason why they're a bit stressed is because SlimedAlien and them are friends. However, they're trying to preach that they don't want to have like a biased outlook on this purely to them being friends. You see, this conversation looks like it went very civil and very well. However, behind the scenes, it really isn't as it seems. Literally not too long right after this conversation they had with Shister, which seemed very civil and friendly and understanding, Exolen would go into this private group chat that they had to essentially try to find any way possible to discredit Shister in any means necessary, with the attempt of guilt by association once again, where they try to like discredit their whole experience and their whole story of what happened to them simply because they happen to be on one of my live streams. Now this already shows that Exolen is a two-faced liar. Now we'll definitely be going into the group chat leaks way later into this video, trust me, we'll have a whole segment on that, but this is just very interesting to show that they acted very friendly, very civil, and right when they were done with the conversation, they tried to find any way possible to discredit Shister. Now, speaking of bad faith malicious actors, let's kind of reel our way back into SlimedAlien a little bit. As I stated previously in this video, I did have a run-in with SlimedAlien a month before this situation, with the context being the Frick the Pirate document made on Shister accusing them of very insane slanderous things. Now, SlimedAlien themselves actually did contribute a lot of slander to this situation against Shister. However, they would try to frame it to you like they just kind of stumbled across this and was just simply curious.
I joined the server, and originally I was talking about small stuff, and I had actually supplied some of the screenshots, although I wanted no part in the document. Like, they didn't ask me first before putting them, which it was my fault for putting it in a server in the first place, but like, I didn't want to be part of a document, especially not against Chester, because even given our past, I don't hate him and I don't dislike him. I was just fucking, like, talking because I had never gotten the chance to talk about something like that before.
No, what's really funny to me is for someone that didn't really want to get too involved in this situation, they sure had some pretty interesting things to say about Shister. Even with this screenshot here where they're calling Shister a liar and a Nazi. They would even go on to maliciously paint previous conversations with Shister in hopes to kind of have it be added to the document being made on them.
He cropped out a message from when we were friends where I was joking around, and he crops a screenshot where I send of his house because he gave me his address, and I'm just like, remember? And with the full context of the screenshot, you can tell that we're both joking around. He just crops it to make it look like I'm blackmailing him. No paranoia or whatever can excuse this. He's just being malicious and lying about me because he's upset that he didn't get his way with me.
Now, to pretty much wrap this whole thing up with SlimedAlien, the whole reason why I bring it up is because this kind of contradicts some of Exolen's morals and like his own standards that he publicly preaches, and on top of that, it's definitely a situation that he really messed up due to personal bias and emotionally driven reactions. Which, speaking of which, let's talk about the hit piece that he made on me.
Throughout this video, I intend to show you how evil these people are. Here's the creators on screen. All of these people stick by Ace and say the same stuff. They are all involved in this. They are all a part of this.
So, after being critical with the guy, I was met with something quite interesting. He made a hit piece on me, which was filled with a bunch of guilt by association and baseless claims. One of the worst hit pieces I've seen in a while, and that's not just because it was against me. It's because he literally makes a bunch of claims with literally no evidence to support it. It's really bad. Right off the bat, he starts the video off with a quite interesting baseless claim.
Today I'm going to show you basically how all of these people are just racist, ableist, weirdos, and how they are just scummy and have no morals of their own, even seen defending predators. Today I intend on showing you how this community does not need to keep growing. I'm going to rip away all their credibility so that you see no reason to watch any of their videos anymore.
See, case in point. This is quite literally just proving the whole thing where it's like he just makes a bunch of claims with no evidence, and even when he was pushed on this behind the scenes, which trust me, we'll get into that with the fourth segment of the video, he doesn't have any proof or really any answer for the reason why he made these claims. He also then proceeds to be disingenuous with a earlier stream. So essentially, for some context, there was a person in the community named Raya Garis who's pretty infamous in the AMC. They are a person who got a lot of controversy for making and producing a bunch of lolly art. However, there's been speculation that there could be something deeper there. However, what I had an issue with Exolen was that they called him a child groomer. Now, Raya Garis, as of now, doesn't have any victims or any kids that they've taken advantage of. So I simply said that calling them a child groomer would be inaccurate and also just not true. You could probably make the argument that they are a pedophile where they have allegedly admitted to it, and the reason why I say allegedly is because it's kind of hard to confirm whether these screenshots are real or not. However, what I will say is it was kind of a weird response that when I asked them directly, instead of answering no, they just blocked me. So the context of me even having Raya Garis add in the first place is because I was reaching out to them because I was going to be making a video on them. However, plans did kind of change down the road, but the whole context of this conversation I even had with them was I was supposed to be able to ask any question and they would answer to the most honest of their ability, which makes it even weirder that they just didn't give me an answer when I asked them about those screenshots, but just blocked me instead. Now, to be very blatantly clear, with someone like Raya Garis, they are a person with many controversies and honestly are probably a potential pedophile allegedly. I can't prove it 100%, however, their behaviors are very suspicious. But when it comes to calling them a child groomer, like I previously said earlier, there is no victim that they went after. There's no one that they took action on. There's a big difference between a potential pedophile and a full-blown child groomer. And that was essentially the whole thing I was trying to get through with Exolen. There's no kid that was victimized, and calling them a child groomer would just be slanderous. But of course, Exolen proceeds to strip away every single little bit of context in order to make this next point.
Even agreeing with a pedophile named Raya Garis, they make lolly porn straight up. They are a pedophile straight the fuck up. You can see why I've been cautious of Ace.
Oh, and for this also to make sense, this was never, what I showed you was way more than, what most people could show you with Raya Garis, because this was more of a thing that was, recently found out after this situation and was, more dug into. So Exolen's argument for calling this person a pedophile purely leaned on whether or not they made, lolicon and liked it or not. It had nothing to do with them saying any of the things I showed in the tweets or anything. So, essentially, they were calling them a pedophile and a child groomer because they consumed and produced lolicon. Just kind of basically reeling back into the point that there was literally no evidence to call this person a child groomer for. So, because I corrected them on them using a word incorrectly, they would actually go around and try to say I'm pro-lolly and I defended a pedophile. However, they'll take away this context to make it look like I was just cool with everything Raya Garis did. No, I'm not. I don't like Raya Garis. I think what they did is just disgusting. However, I think if you're also going to label someone something, it should also be accurate. But then again, this is the same person who will have no issue with muddying the waters as long as the person's disliked. Now, to show the pure irony of also this Exolen, to just kind of show that he doesn't really believe with what he's saying, he'll throw a fit that people will make content for a money gain or a financial gain and doing it for the money. They'll throw a fit for that, but then also promotes things that would make them money.
These people are nothing but worms and parasites trying to get clout out of me, and I can say that, yes, they're trying to farm clout off me. They literally call themselves slop creators. A bunch of racists and ableist weirdos who never cared about the traumas the victims went through, only ever wanting the money and confirming it many times. I wouldn't support them, I would ignore their existence. Their credibility should be in the dirt now. Anyway, yeah, thank you all for watching. Check out my members here. Look at them. They're so beautiful. They support me and they help me live. Anyway, yeah, I also have a Ko-Fi.
To be very brutally honest with you, if you're ever going to claim that you're not making content for money, views, and attention, then if you're not doing it for money, then demonetize your channel. If you're not doing it for views, upload it to Google Drives and give it to people individually. If you're not doing it for attention, then don't post it publicly. See, that's the whole thing that's like an issue with this argument. They're trying to show that they are morally virtuous, and they're only doing this to spread awareness and for good reasons. However, obviously, money is a contributing factor in this whole equation as well. So it's kind of always annoying to see creators always say that they're not doing this for money but then have their channel fully monetized, because it just comes off as disingenuous and dishonest, and they're just like trying to pretend to be better than they actually are to try to get internet brownie points. Now, to wrap this segment up, because I believed I really got my point across and showed like how this person just preaches things that they don't personally believe, I want to kind of go into a bit more detail behind the scenes now and to kind of show you the aftermath of this whole situation.
What's up, everyone? It's Given Ant. I hope we're all thriving today, unless you're Exolen, which in case, rough couple of months, hey buddy. So my buddy Ace decided to hit me up to hand me a glorious gold mine. Discord chat leaks, my own DMs with Exolen, all of it. And being the generous, wholesome guy that I am, I decided to post them on Twitter. And let me tell you about these messages, they're hilarious, but also kind of pathetic. It really shows the type of person Exolen is when they think nobody's watching. And spoiler alert, it's not a very good look. First things first, we gotta talk about that group chat, boys. So this little group chat was made before Exolen dropped his hit piece on Ace and Friends. It's basically a private chat where Exolen and a bunch of other art commentator people, those people being SlimedAlien, Yumi Cactus, and of course the now excommunicated SlimedAlien, who in this group chat goes by Dimitri. Now here's where things get really interesting, because the very first thing Exolen decides to do in this chat, he immediately starts asking if Shister, the same Shister who is a victim of SlimedAlien's abuse, has ever worked with Ace. On top of that, Exolen also straight up says he's trying to deplatform Ace, me, and anyone else he doesn't like. But here's what it really shows me. Instead of focusing on the actual abuse situation with Shister and Slime, Exolen is more concerned on weaponizing it against the people he's got beef with. Watering it down, twisting it around, just because Shister, quote unquote, worked with Ace. Which is insane, considering this is the same guy who acts like he cares about victims more than we do.
A bunch of racists and ableist weirdos who never cared about the traumas the victims went through, only ever wanting the money and confirming it many times.
When SlimedAlien decides to ask Exolen, hey, what exactly did Ace Space do? It's a very simple question, right? Well, Exolen's response is definitely something. According to him, we are no good racists, ableists, degenerates who, quote, argue for lolly. Now, of course, he doesn't give us any examples of how any of us are doing any of that. His only evidence is that we say mean slurs. Very groundbreaking stuff. Now, the lolly accusations just kind of comes out of nowhere. Nobody knows where they came from. Nobody knows what he's talking about. I guess he just tried to throw something at the wall and see what's stuck. And then also here's Yumi Cactus, who also is a minor, by the way. It's just eating this whole thing up, no questions asked. And you people wonder why I don't like any of you. Now this is when Exolen decides to go on a schizophrenic rant, basically calling us that we are a weird set of people, that apparently we don't think slop is a bad term, so we make slop. He says that, again, we don't take situations seriously and we're only doing it for money, calling us evil, disgusting vermin who only want money, that we have no morals, and that we make edgy jokes, saying that he's tired of us and is going to stomp our community out. Now, by far, this is the funniest part about this. He says that we're, quote, they are filthy degenerates. Every single one. So let me respond to each one of these accusations that he made toward me and Ace. Do I make slop content? Yes. Do I only do this for money and attention? Yes. It's really funny to me, out of everybody, Exolen is getting on to us for making slop content.
But you yourself, Exolen, when your content was still up on the platform before you took it down like a coward, you made slop content. Also, him acting like he's going to stomp us out, like he's this big powerhouse in Artcom, is hilarious. You were a 7K channel. You have no power over any of us. Honestly, you KO'd yourself when you uploaded that video. Also, he shows a screenshot of a bunch of people he's going to be criticizing in the video. Some of those people were barely involved in his own video, which is hilarious. Now, at the end of that rant message, he did say something that I left out, and I think it's now funny to bring it up now. He says, it's going to be a funny surprise when he sees his face on my channel. When, funny enough, Soph the Neko, who's the one who leaked us these messages, sent this to us before he published his video. So all of us already knew that he was making this video and some of the things he was already claiming. So how's that surprise going? Can we also talk about the fact of how Exolen found that infamous N-word tweet that he tried to oust me for? Apparently he searched my name into Google and Google promoted that tweet specifically to him. Thanks, Google. Thanks a lot for that. Now we're gonna get to the fun part, my messages with Exolen. You see, I was actually working on a video on Exolen and SlimedAlien, but I decided to scrap it just because I got bored with the project. And in these messages, he says some hilarious things that shows exactly the type of person he is. So one of the first questions I decide to ask, in your video with Ace and friends, you say we defended a predator, but you don't actually show any evidence of this. What is this about? Then he gets a pretty funny reply. In this, he first says that he didn't voice his thoughts very well, and that he's sorry for it. He says, I still believe defending predators, especially when the victims are getting mocked because someone tries to inject their own moral compass into it, is incredibly childish. Now, while I understand the sentiment, the issue is that you're lumping in defending predators while people are criticizing how a situation is being handled. That's not the same thing. Just because someone is asking questions about the case that is being presented or pushes back about some moral grandstanding doesn't mean that they're excusing the predator's actions. This will become important later down the line. Exolen continues by getting upset that people are making grooming jokes on Ace's streams, and also says that I, quote, defended Birdie, who actively pushes kids to cut themselves and send photos of it. Also says that we do no research and we just make rage bait videos. The research claim is, to me, very funny because he actually doesn't show any evidence of us doing no research. And the whole Birdie situation, saying that I, quote, was defending Birdie, was the fact that I was defending Birdie on a 13 and 16 rare age gap, where Exolen was calling it grooming, which by definition, it wasn't. I never defended the actions of Birdie in everything. Just because I defended him in one action does not mean I defend him in all. I still think Birdie is a gross, disgusting freak of a human being. My issue when initially I was criticizing Exolen on this entire situation with Birdie was that you're falsely labeling somebody as something that is not inherently true. No matter if they have done things that you might consider them grooming with other situations, that situation was not grooming. And you give them a perfect out where they can say, well, they got this situation wrong, they mislabeled this situation, so what's stopping them from doing it with others? We can't be reckless like this and start throwing labels when we think it's funny. And that's what I was criticizing Exolen on. I wasn't defending Birdie on everything that I've ever done. Now, this is when Exolen starts saying that what we were doing was extremely unprofessional behavior, and that he's just gonna let us do it and continue to push everything that we're pushing, and that YouTube has been really bad for his health and mental health, so he's pulling out of it. I hate this idea of that we're not being professional. We're 1K shitter YouTube channels. What professionalism are you talking about? We're not journalists. We're not investigators. We're just people with a mic making fun of people on the internet and criticizing them. That's all it is. And good thing you are pulling out of this community because you clearly can't handle any pushback or anybody being inherently negative to you. And if this drama actually was affecting your mental health that severely, yeah, it's probably a good idea you get off the internet. Now, I do ask him one more question related to SlimedAlien and his relationship with them, but I'll let Ace explain that and dive into that a little bit later in this video. But after this, I was removed on Discord and presumably blocked, where I couldn't message him anymore. So I guess he didn't like that I was messaging this stuff again. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, that's all for the group chat leaks and my messages with Exolen. I appreciate Ace for having me on to his little video. If you want to see more content like this, me and Ace did a collaboration on my own channel talking about the 90s router, so go check that out. And also go check out our podcast that we do with Yen named Abstract. Anyway, see you losers later. Heading back
back to Ace.
Thanks, Ant, for hopping on. I'll leave your channel in the description so you guys can go check it out if you want to on your free time. Now, there is a few things I do want to touch on briefly before fully closing this video, just to wrap up the aftermath and leak stuff. To be very abundantly clear, the group chat is mainly just to focus on Exolen and Slime. Yes, it is true that Yumi and Soph the Neko were in there, but I'll get into them in a second. However, this is really meant to just be highlighting on Exolen and SlimedAlien. This is literally the only involvement that Yumi even had in this. It is dumb, sure, to just run with something when told with no evidence. However, this really did not go anywhere. I don't really care. They're just a dumb teenager at the end of the day. I really could not care less that they were really in this group chat. And as for Soph the Neko, they were simply just trying to get both sides of the story, but when they saw that Exolen was being slanderous, they provided me all this stuff to even go through anyways. So if anything, Soph has been really quite the big help in this whole thing. Here are just some screenshots to also prove that Soph was literally just trying to get both sides of the story and also asking if there was any validity to what Exolen was saying. Now, another thing I do want to highlight is I did actually attempt to reach out to both SlimedAlien and Exolen before making this video, and Soph even tried helping me reach out to Exolen considering I was blocked. But surprise, surprise, they don't want to talk to me because I do believe that they don't even want to defend their positions because they literally can't. But if you needed something to learn from this whole thing, don't jump in blindly to defend people and don't make baseless allegations on someone that you can't even defend. But yes, that was the entirety of the Exolen drama, and there probably was a lot of things that you guys didn't know about because most people would only know about things from the third segment. So I hope that this was very entertaining for you to watch, and on that note, I am going to be wrapping up this video. So leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and also I just want to take a moment to thank all the people who became channel memberships. It does help a lot, and I really do appreciate you guys doing something that you really don't even have to. So yes, I appreciate it a lot. Thank you guys for coming by the A space, and I hope you enjoyed the watch. See you next time.
We all got internet personas we hide behind.